This is TWiT.
It's a sci-fi trope. You put on the headset or you jack in the back of your head. You're suddenly in the metaverse, a world that is... And by the way, I have to point out, in every single science fiction novel, whether it's Snow Crash or Cyberpunk or Ready Player One, and every single one of them, when you're jacking in, it's because the real world is so awful, so dystopian, that you don't want to be in it, right?
Is that our future, sir? This world is just going to become a
our present?
awful place.
Well, I don't think that's the right answer, but maybe it is. I don't know. Are you all? What do you, Ant? Are you looking for? You like the VR stuff, right?
Yeah, I dig the VR stuff, but I think the way your future guest host, Mr. Daniel Suarez, put it in his franchise, the Demon franchise, I think that is something that's way more useful. And that was just the wearing the visors that gave you more of a, not VR, what is it?
AR, it was augmented reality. Yes, I loved his vision of AR. Reality. You're right.
You know, I think that's the way to go because you're not totally jacked into something, but you are out in the real world and you're able to see different things in the meta space, you know, that may be useful for you out there. Now, granted, there are some security implications with that because I don't want to look at a strange person coming down the street and see their credit history and things like that. But it would be nice that if someone walks up to me and say, "Hey, are you Ant from TWiT?" I could look at him and make sure they're not some weirdo.
or you could say, "Oh, it's you, mashed potato. How are you?"
Depends who's asking.
Yeah, that's actually one of the best parts. At the very beginning of Demon, they're walking around and you could see people's reputation score floating around their head, but you're still in the real world.
You're still in the real world.
Just additional information. That's mixed reality or augmented reality. That's what apparently they say Apple's working on. Microsoft has the HoloLens, which is kind of a not very satisfactory experience of the same thing.
I just don't like the idea, especially in this time that we're in with the pandemic and people having to be locked in. I don't like the idea of just giving more of a reason to stay locked in and isolated from people. Even if you're in your house, you're now isolating yourself from people within your house because you're in this virtual environment kind of thing. You know, I got boys that like to play on their phones or play video games or what have you. And every now and then I have to tell them, put it down. I don't care if you ain't got nothing to say to me. You need to come out of that room and get some air and be around other people. You know, I think it's better for the psyche. You know?
I don't get the feeling that Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse is augmented reality. It really is more like that old Snow Crash where you're in a new...
It definitely looks more VR.
Yeah. Because he wants you to be transported to a whole different world where he's got control of the advertisements there to
right.
Like, but I mean, genuinely, that's what it is. And what's fascinating about all of this, I feel, is the psychology behind it, because there is, you know, what Ant's talking about, there is a lot to suggest that human physical touch is something that psychologically we need. And those interactions, in particular, the physical touch interactions, are starved in VR. However, our brains are not very good at the base level of differentiating between real and imagined. And there are a lot of really interesting studies surrounding that I won't go into. But the point is, you can be taken away to another world where you are communicating with other people, and outside of human physical touch, which I do think is very important, you can have those same interactions, experiences, and the psychological benefit of being around other people in this virtual space if your brain is capable of, if your brain, you know, sort of falls into that and you kind of get taken out of yourself. So
it's a big
I agree that there are the pros and cons of people maybe having an issue where they do get so sucked into it because it is like real life in some ways and will continue to get better. And I'm certainly more of a proponent of AR over VR myself as well.
But have you ever, I'm sure you guys have, stood in virtual reality in what looks like a very tall building right on the edge, and you're looking down, and your heart starts pounding.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It's real.
Such an awesome feeling. Yeah.
Even the kind of weak, VR we have, the low-res VR we have now, is capable of tricking you into feeling like you're really there. Imagine, a few years hence.
There's an embodiment there that you feel in that scenario. Hearing what you were saying, and as far as kind of like the disconnectedness and needing like reality and real touch, especially and like you said it as well, Mikah, in the last couple of years where we've been so locked down, I would pose the counterpoint to that, which was that during the true lockdown where like no one was going anywhere, like things have eased up now, but when things were really locked down and we were starved for like getting out and doing something, I was thanking my lucky stars that we had a couple of headsets here, because me and my girls could throw on the headsets and we could go to a virtual bowling alley together. And it was like we were bowling together. I just happened to be up in this room, and my other daughter was in our living room, and the other daughter was in the den. But we were all in the same place together, and it really was like we were in a place hanging out together. It was so much fun.
But that's exactly the difference,
what we needed when we couldn't have it.
But that's the difference. You actually came together and said, "Hey, let's put the headsets on," and then when it was done, you took them off, and y'all came back together.
No question. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I'm an introvert. I love just chilling by myself, but I do have to make sure I spend time with the family and because it's healthy. It's the right thing to do.
Were you wearing the Quest 2? Is that what you were using, Jason, when you were doing that?
Yeah, the Quest. Actually, it was three different systems: Quest, Quest 2, and the PlayStation VR.
Okay.
So,
and were they all roughly equal in experience, or was there one that you liked better than the other?
I mean, the PlayStation VR is definitely the lowest tier. Like, that's the one I always end up in, and the girls get the Quest.
Dad life.
Really? You sacrifice? Is that it?
Just because the controller mechanism is way different, right?
Yeah.
It's not nearly as intuitive as it is on the Quest and Quest 2. But then I prefer the Quest 2 just because it's a higher resolution. It's maybe a little less comfortable, but yeah, they're both pretty similar in my opinion.
So I got to be a part of Horizon Worlds while it was still in invite-only stage and try that out, which is Facebook's like first take on the metaverse. And it was a really fascinating experience, building my own little world, but then also going to this shared space. There was a VC over in the corner talking with somebody else about investments that he just made. And I was like, I'm staying very far away from that. That sounds really boring. But there was this
sounds like Clubhouse.
Right?
Wow.
There's a young person going around saying hi to everybody, but then a Facebook person, like community, guru or whatever, came into the space, and she was walking around and was telling people about some different kind of hidden Easter eggs. And so you saw all of these people kind of having this delightful moment of learning new ways to interact and make sparkles appear above your head and all sorts of stuff. And I was kind of listening in a little bit from a distance while I was playing with a paper airplane game, standing atop and kind of looking down on this whole group of people. And I was able to do this all from my
Sounds like a real party.
Office.
Actually.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was really like a real party. It was around Halloween too. So this one world would take you to different worlds that people built where there were Halloween themed things. So there was like a haunted house and some games where you tried to get rid of ghosts and different people could play. And there was a huge scoreboard in the background where everybody could see their score and compete against one another. And I didn't have to move from a spot, which was a pretty cool thing to be able to do, again, while you're in lockdown. So I do see some value to this. I think the big thing is adoption and whether or not that is going to take place.
I'm actually not worried about adoption because I look at how people have taken to VR and they really love it. I mean, there's a certain percentage of people who will always be nauseated by it. I think I'm in that group.
Yeah.
But
I struggle with the latency.
Maybe it'll get better and it won't be an issue. What you just described sounds pretty cool, Mikah. I guess the question is, do we have to be in meet space to relate to one another, or can we really have a genuine experience with one another in a virtual space? Do you think we can?
Right. I think that I'll tell you, I think two things. One, this is still, in the way that it's working now, is relatively new. And so there will be a number of studies that go out. But the studies that we have seen, I think in Psychology Today even, there was a piece about people going through therapy and the empathy that can take place in virtual space. But I will say, I joined Horizon Worlds, and I've got this issue of everywhere I create an online persona, I always use my name, @Mikah Sargent, on everything. And in Horizon Worlds, after I'd already created my character, my avatar, or whatever, I thought, oh man, I feel kind of bare and open to the world. I kind of wish I would have just come up with a different username as I'm walking around and my name's above my head. And that was a weird experience for me because I'm on camera a lot of the time. I talk in front of people. And so to feel enough exposed in this virtual space was kind of an interesting thing that I was not expecting to feel. And it kind of changed how I interacted with it. And I had to get comfortable turning off my mute switch for the microphone and start to participate in the conversations that were taking place around me. So yeah, I do think that we can, I want to go with the word supplement. I don't want to go with replace, but supplement some of those interactions we have elsewhere. Because we're trying to do that now just in text-based and in video conversations. And so the closer we can get to the real thing, the more our brains can sort of give way with that suspension of disbelief. And I think the more then it will work.
I definitely agree with supplementing it. Because I think about every daggum Wednesday at about 2:30 p.m. Pacific time when I get to sit down virtually with you and Mrs. Higginbotham and Mr. Jarvis, and just how much that means to me, the conversations we have every week. Yes, I'm working, but it is, I freaking love just sitting with you folks for those 2 hours, and I think that's something that most people would enjoy. If they had that type of connection with people, they can't necessarily go out and hang out at the bar or anything like that. But if you can fire up decent audio and decent camera and be able to see each other and just have some meaningful conversation, that goes a long way in supplementing just the regular in-person experience, in my opinion.
I mean, John just pointed out we are actually in the metaverse, the four of us. We're not connected. We're not in the same room. We're not in meet space. And people who are watching us, I think at this point, probably feel like they're around the table with us conversing. Here's the thing I really don't want to have happen. I think there's a lot of potential in it. It'll be very exciting. And I think that the things that have been most exciting about technology have been things that have been created by individual creators working in garages, working independently. I really don't want Mark Zuckerberg's vision of what this is to become the dominant vision. That is not ground up. That is from top down. I think Mark's a creep, and I don't think his vision of what the metaverse is, I mean, I find his ideas creepy. And I don't want him to, but is this technologically so hard that it isn't going to happen kind of naturally as the internet happened? It's going to happen, only from a big corporation?
If you ask Intel will tell you that there's no way we're going to get this in the next 5-10 years. There was a blog post by an Intel exec a research scientist who said, look, this is going to take 1,000 times the compute power we have right now. Unfortunately, the blog post ended up kind of being an advertisement because at the end they're like, but we can do things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, which Intel chips can do to get us sort of the way there. But the larger argument was that, the thing that Facebook is trying to say is coming next year or the year after is quite a way away.
I agree with you. And if you look at it, it's very cartoony. But let's not forget what's the order of magnitude between the first IBM PC running at 4 megahertz and today's iPhone running, we've got billions of transistors in our pockets running at many gigahertz. That's more than 1,000. So I don't think saying, 1,000 times more power is really a deterrent. You're right. It's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Some form of it might, like what we're experiencing right now.
Right. Baby steps.
But maybe 10 years from now, or maybe 20 years from now, we'll certainly have that capability. The only question is, I really don't want it to come from I don't want it to come top down. I think it needs to be organically developed. I don't want one company to run it.
Who's to say it wouldn't be something that the open source community jumps on and
oh, I'm sure they are
as well.
I mean, people like Jaron Lanier, he's been working on this for 20 years himself. One of the very first proponents of virtual reality. So I think that there is a movement that way. I just don't want it to come from, I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to own the metaverse. That to me is a nightmare scenario.
It's worth pointing out that Facebook did actually say, or Meta did actually say, we don't want to own the metaverse.
Sure.
But exactly. Then you name your company Meta. So really, I don't know if I believe that.
I'd like to see, I would love to, I mean, look what the internet has done. And I don't think we would have known 20 or 30 years ago what the internet was going to be today. And it's certainly made a huge difference in our lives and everything we experience. I think that VR, AR, mixed reality, I think it's all going to be part of something, is absolutely going to happen. It might take 10, 20 years. But just like 20 years ago, you saw the beginnings of the internet. I think now we're seeing the beginnings of it. I think the internet succeeded because it was a lot of little people. It eventually, became dominated by a handful of companies to its disadvantage, to its detriment. But maybe we can do something a little better this time with AR and VR. I'm hoping.
1,000 blockchain enthusiasts just said, that's how we solve it.
That's Web 3.